Welcome to week 9 of the F.I.R.E. travel series. I created this series prior to us traveling to Europe for 3 months. If you're new to my channel, my name is Jake. My wife and I retired from our 9-to-5 job by investing into real estate and the stock market so that we could achieve financial independence. If you're new to the channel, welcome. In week 9, after 2 weeks of staying put, we left the area of Freiburg and we made our way north. We first made a stop in Heidelberg. I've been to Heidelberg many times and absolutely love visiting the orange rooftop city of Heidelberg. My favorite part of visiting the city is walking through the city center. There you can visit local bakeries and eat pastries while walking through the city, all while getting a glimpse of the overshadowing Heidelberg Castle. Seeing the castle from the city center in the distance is really a magical thing to experience. You can't visit Heidelberg without walking up to the castle and getting a view of the entire city. Here you have the breathtaking views of the orange rooftop city overlooking the river. This is a tourist must-see in Germany. In fact, there are so many tourists in Heidelberg, you will sometimes see people wearing a t-shirt saying, "I am actually from Heidelberg." Next, we made our way up to the city of Trier. Now, I've never been to the city of Trier before. Now, this is a bordering town of Luxembourg, so we were able to take a short drive into Luxembourg and, just so that we can say we did it. That was basically the reason for it, because I have no connections or anything there. It was just, hey, we've been there. We ended the week by visiting the city of Cologne. My wife lived and worked in Cologne for 10 years. This was a great time to catch up with old friends. We visited Cologne in 2022 when our son was 1 year old. Now, Lucas is 4 years old, so her friends were in a big surprise to see how big he has grown since they last saw him. Cologne is a very big city and we have visited many times. We focused this time on the outskirts of the city where we got to visit some neighboring cities like Aachen. If you've ever been to that area, it's very famous for Aachener Printen. They have a very beautiful dome. We got to go visit the Lindt, the chocolate factory while we were there. And it's just a short time from Belgium. So we got to go and drive to Belgium, so that we could say that we were in Belgium, of course. And our favorite part about visiting Cologne is seeing old friends and reliving old memories, but also exploring the neighboring area. But more on that in next week's video. Betty asked the question, I have known someone who has spent his emergency fund to purchase JEP-Q and JEPI. For those of you that don't know, this is a covered call ETF, trying to make more extra money than just keeping the money in a regular high yield savings account. What is your opinion on that? How would you recommend to approach the use of JEP-Q or JEPI in an emergency fund? So I guess I'll answer this question by asking a question myself. Would you be comfortable having your emergency fund in the NASDAQ? Or in other words, invested into QQQ? And in most cases, I think for most people, the answer to that is probably not. In fact, very, very likely not. Because that is what you're doing essentially when you're investing into, JEP-Q, because JEP-Q tracks the NASDAQ. Now, there are some differences and some nuances there, but essentially you do get the downside risk as with QQQ, but you do generate some income. It's just how these strategies work. With JEP-Q, I would say absolutely not. Now, with JEPI, JEPI is a little different. JEPI tracks a lower volatility index of the S&P 500. So it's not like you're just investing into, SPY or the S&P 500 directly. So the weighting are more equally weighted. It's not market cap weighted. So you're going to get less drawdowns, but it's still invested into actual stocks. So I asked the question again, would you have your emergency fund invested into the stock market? I just don't think that that's a good idea. And so in my opinion, no. So the question you want to ask yourself, would you hold stocks as your emergency fund? I can't answer that for you, but for me, I wouldn't in a million years have my emergency fund in the NASDAQ, or in this case, JEP-Q. Now with JEPI, I could see the case being made, but in my opinion, with interest rates so high, you can get a high yield savings account at around 4% right now. So why would you want to take on more risk by going with JEPI? Now, if a savings account or a high yield savings account, I'm not talking about a checking account, I'm talking about a high yield savings account where you're going to get around 4% today, If a high yield savings account in the future hypothetically was only giving you 1%, then yeah, I could see the appeal for something like JEPI. Not JEPQ, JEPI. But even then, I wouldn't do it. Not everyone is the same, and everyone's risk tolerance is different. I think 99% of people who are serious about having an emergency fund should have them in cash, short-term treasuries, or in a high-yield savings account. It all comes down to having it liquid and something where your principal is not going to lose money. I personally have my emergency fund in a high-yield savings account. I put my money where my mouth is, and in my opinion, emergency funds are there in case of an emergency and should be, in my opinion, treated as such. This is such a great question. Thank you so much for asking it, and I hope that this was helpful, and I will see everybody in next week's video.